Yeah, I think, Bill, you invited Piper and Jessica on here, and I don't know, just everybody's just been kind of like, let's just try to create the biggest podcast we could make, I guess, out of this. So I was like talking to my partner, I'm like, I don't really have an agenda or like a particular topic. I guess there's so much shit that's happening, and I think it'd be interesting from Jessica's perspective, like living up in Canada, it's kind of like being in the upstairs of like, neighbors that are just like going completely batshit crazy below. And also just kind of how US centric, obviously we are in the United States, we're so fixated on what's happening here. So, but inevitably it kind of spills over into Canada and it spills over into conversations I'm sure that you have with your friends and neighbors and stuff. So
I should say off the start that I like living in Alberta. People always say it must feel like living above a meth lab or something. And I'm like, well, Alberta's kind of part of the meth lab in a lot of ways. Like I live in one of the most politically conservative provinces in the country. But I live in the city. So there's definitely a big urban rural divide here. Whereas I feel like I live in a bubble of tolerance and progressiveness and all that. Whereas, when I look around the rest of my province and even the town that I grew up in, I'm like, oh, right. I've been able to kind of run away from this for a little bit. But lots to say about US centric news up here. And even, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the exportation of US culture. But even that being said, I always say like America doesn't stop at the border because Canadians, we're not really that different. We are in some ways for sure. I do notice some differences. And I work in healthcare, so. And I work in neonatal intensive care, which crosses over with women's health. So I definitely noticed some differences there. And
within the last week or so, you've noticed
within the last week or so. Yeah. And especially
God bless the Supreme Court, huh?
Oh my goodness. Well, and especially up here, the nurses are unionized as a rule. So generally speaking, we tend to be kind of socialist minded anyways. So I don't run across a lot of people in my working environment that are not of a somewhat similar political mindset to me. So needless to say, all of us are like, what? Like, what? This is 2022. Like, what's going on,
I have a Canada joke.
Canadian
joke. Might be the only one it's the only one I've ever heard.
Okay.
How do you get 100 Canadians out of a pool?
I don't know.
Ask them to leave.
I was going to say, just say please. Like, basically, we'll probably thank you for it too.
But thanks, Jess. Thanks, Piper, for coming on. I really wanted some women, given the recent circumstances, and Jess, you being a nurse too, and in Canada, and Piper, you soon to be an ex-Texan.
So close, I can taste it.
So close.
Congratulations.
But Texas is always on the front line of right-wing crack craziness in the U.S. So, Piper, are you leaving? You're leaving to get out of Texas, or it's just better?
It's a lot of things. My religious group, we really want to form an intentional community that's based on permaculture and religious freedom. We're what we call eco-Luciferians, which is kind of a strange thing, but it's what we do. But for me personally, in addition to trying to help build that, I teach high school. And I think this year was probably the most demoralizing year I've ever had as an educator because of the huge CRT fights here in Texas, the huge attacks on trans students here in Texas, and then, the huge attacks on people with uteruses and just, it's gone so radically right, even for Texas, because there's a lot of people who aren't right wing. I think that's a big misconception, but they're so gerrymandered and disenfranchised that
I've understood that Texas, I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard it say that Texas would be a blue state if it wasn't for the gerrymandering. And that seems true. I mean, I've known people like you from Texas, and I've known a lot of pretty radical left. And there's major cities in Texas. I mean, some of the biggest cities in the United States are in Texas, and urban places is usually more aggressive.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know anybody from Texas that's actually right wing, but I mean, that's probably self-selection bias, but.
Right. Yeah.
All the people you know are from Austin.
No, I mean,
well,
Forrest is from Dallas.
Oh, that's right.
Well,
I thought he was in Houston, but
Texas is just. I think it kind of has a lot of contradictory reputations because, like, it's attracting people like Joe Rogan or what is Elon Musk? Didn't he move from like California there?
Trending too.
Yeah,
he's there a lot, and he's destroying his plants, destroying this really important ecosystem in I think southeast Texas. Yeah, so he's just destroying everything.
Yeah, and I think that I just wanted to say the important thing with like how Texas is, Bill, what you were saying is like Texas has been at the kind of forefront of pushing some of these like right wing. Legislation, that eventually gets, pushed up to the Supreme Court and things like this, is that, in these so-called red states, you kind of have a lot of people that are not Republican, they're not really conservatives, and they're kind of being taken hostage by this minority group, you could say, of people that are just trying to push through this kind of Christo-fascist agenda. And I think that's true. Like, I mean, I'm from Idaho. I had the feeling that there was a lot of people I knew that were around me that were not conservatives. They were like, no, we think we should have access to healthcare. It should be free. Reproductive rights are a thing. We should have that, But the legislation that is, that ends up getting passed is all being done by the Republican Party. It's really difficult for anyone other than Republican to get into positions of leadership and power. So it kind of just feels like everything is stacked against people that most people want. And I think that that's the important thing is as things divide along state lines as far as who gets access to what kind of, reproductive rights or whatever, there's a lot of people that are just like, we're all kind of being held hostage here. And I think people like yourself, like Piper, you're just trying to get out, trying to find a better spot, Yeah.
Because it's a very cheap down here comparatively, and I mean the Rust Belt is cheapish, but there's a lot of people that you just can't afford to move, and or if you find a space that's affordable, there's no jobs, and so you have all of these kind of economic hostages, social hostages. You have so many folks that their parents brought them across the border, and now because of the changes, they're terrified to leave. And now that ICE has expanded where they can do their kind of no-knock raids, that's a lot of places. So it's just a nightmare for so many people. They're so trapped and so desperate, and just further and further disenfranchised. Which it feels like that's what they want. Just kind of perpetual serf class, right? But it's just so incredibly painful to watch. Yeah, I'm relatively privileged in that I just have a cat and myself to look after. So as a millennial, I have no property, I have nothing tying me down, so I can leave. But that's a privilege.
I guess that is the good thing about being unable to buy a house is you're not tied down by a house, right? You can just leave.
Always got to find the silver lining.
Yeah, no,
You don't own the house owns you. Take it from a homeowner.
Right.
Exactly.
Non-stop.
Okay,
really.
Boomer.
Buy a farm sometimes.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's just consistently bad news here in the United States.
Oh, like rapidly unraveling, like every day.
Yeah.
The pace of it is, I mean, I don't know if you felt that. It's just, the Supreme Court is just, just one thing after another. And they're this minority, priestly class of, 6 people.
They lied in their confirmation hearing.
Right.
And they should be rendered irrelevant.
And then
they're just another handmaiden of the people at the top. See, I would disagree with some of what you were saying, is that we tend to get mesmerized by this right and left wing nonsense. It's top down, always has been. It's the rich versus the rest of us. And if it was any kind of egalitarian where you just had different opposing viewpoints on the right and the left, that would be something completely different. But it's not. The inequality in this country is something that most people simply cannot grasp.
Yeah.
There are charts that show it, and you would be stunned as to what that looks like.
Yeah.
And those are, you cannot have a functioning democracy with that kind of inequality.
Yeah.
Nobody gets listened to unless you have money.
And didn't they just picked up another case, right, that they're going to hear from Mississippi, I think, that basically will just it's basically allowing the state legislature to override the state courts in terms of handling election legalities.
Right.
Right.
So they would just get to do what Trump basically wanted to do. In any,
they could send their own
state
electors if they want to.
Christian dominionism. That's something to be afraid of.
Yeah.
I think they should have dominion over everything, including the people.
And they're going for it.
Well, it's like right now they're having the January 6th hearings, and it's like, yeah, like it's incredibly, there's a lot of information coming out, and it's like pretty fucking obvious what happened. It's like, okay, it's a coup attempt. They said it pretty fucking clearly, but like, okay, that didn't work, and that was more of a hard coup type of thing, and now they're just doing it through like the Supreme Court, and they're going to legislate it. They're going to like start doing this in a more formal, legalistic manner. So it's like, is there going to be a committee about that? Like, no, there isn't. It's just going to, by 2024, 2025, we're just going to potentially see whatever remnants of a so-called democracy. It's just going to be gone here in the United States.
There hasn't been 3 years.
Well, when they take Congress, they'll turn the inquiry around.
Oh, absolutely.
Inquiring against.
And they'll kill the filibuster as soon as they get a chance. I mean, they just, the right really understands power in a maniacal, sadistic way, but they know how to use it, they know how to wield it, and it's something the left can learn. The left, the United States is just.
But the really right also has the money.
Right, and they have the money.
They're able to, I mean, as soon as they declared that money is free speech, we're all screwed.
Right, yeah. Yeah,
I mean, there was a Princeton study that said, if you've known in some kind in electronics that there's something called background noise, that it's just a hiss, doesn't really matter, it's just something to be overcome. And they said, unless you're in like the top 1%, everybody else is hiss. You don't even get heard. So it's already gone.
Well, I think my concern for the people that aren't at that level is, we think of this integration as, kind of being rapid, and it is definitely speeding up. But I think what a lot of society isn't anticipating is how sectarian it's going to get. And that's kind of sectarian violence with lots of different fronts of violence, and in kind of a, just the fracturing and crumbling away in a lot of different directions is going to be something I think most Americans are not going to be prepared to handle. Kind of like Syria and a lot of other situations.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of stuff Americans aren't ready to handle.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure.
Well,
I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, it's just our infrastructure is so complex. The moment you take off one of the Jenga pieces, it's just going to get real interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of like the supply chain.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I kind of wanted Jessica to step in because, I mean, like, we're all kind of talking about stuff, like, we're all, like, living here. We're like, it's all, like,
It's been interesting to watch through my life, really, because, I was born in 1982. I'm a child of the 90s. I remember the Iraq War starting. I remember the Afghanistan War starting. Of course, I remember 9/11. I remember those events. And I remember also when George Bush got elected for a second term, I thought for sure the world was over. And then, yeah, I really did. Like my whole thing, I was probably, 18 at the time. And I just remember he wanted to go drill in the Arctic. And I was like, oh my God, the world's over.
And privatize social security and all that.
Yeah. And then Trump got elected, and I drank a bottle of whiskey that night because I was just like, what the hell is happening? But when I think about, I didn't grow up religious in any way. I wasn't baptized, and I'm very thankful for that. My parents very much let me explore and said, if something appeals to you later, you're free to make your own choice. But with that being said, my first 10 years of my life were spent in a very artistic, progressive community in Calgary. And then I moved to a very small town in Saskatchewan that was religiously dominated by the church. And I ended up in Catholic school for 7 years. And that definitely solidified any opinions I already had about organized religion as somebody on the outside looking in. And so for me, I feel like I've been watching in awe through the decades of my life of things that seem like batshit crazy to me happening in the States on a regular occurrence. Like it seems, I think things are going to go one way and then it just doesn't. And I kind of learned to accept that as somebody who really has no say in the matter. I mean, as a citizen of the other 7.2 billion people on earth who are absolutely affected by US politics and absolutely affected by US choices, but don't have a vote in the matter. It's been, there's been moments of real grief of being kind of feeling like we're being dragged along for the horror show, because the reality is, like, the US has one of the biggest economies in the world. And, when that starts to fall, you do start to see the effects trickle outwards. And also, when you were talking about the inequality and like the income gap, I guess, and the class gap in the States, the last time that I was in the States was 2018 in Mississippi, of all places. I was staying with a friend. Yeah, I was actually dating a man from Mississippi, and he lived in a suburb just outside of Jackson. And I remember him driving me around Jackson, and it was shocking, truly shocking to me. I mean, we have income inequality, and there's a huge gap between, Indigenous people in particular, where I am, and a lot of other groups of people. I mean, that's probably the most visible inequality where I am. There's parts of my city as well that are fairly hard off, and noticeably hard off. I live fairly close to one of those areas. But Jackson for me was shocking. And I traveled quite a bit in my 20s. And this person that I was with, he was driving me around Jackson. And I think he was seeing the city for the first time through somebody else's eyes in a long time. And I was very quiet, I guess. And we stopped at a corner, and he said, we really shouldn't be stopped here very long. And I said, how come? And he said, well, because if, like, to the left of us, the cops don't even go to that neighborhood anymore. And I said, what do you mean they don't go to that neighborhood anymore? And he's like, they get calls, but they just don't go. It's too dangerous. And then, I'm looking around, and there's all these buildings that are boarded up. And the person that I was with described it as urban rot. Everything was just kind of seemed almost stuck in the 80s to me, and like things hadn't been taken care of, and it was shocking. And I mean, the reality is the suburb that he lived in was mostly white people. It was, there was actual marble fountains and box stores and all of this. And then you're driving downtown Jackson, and it's quite different than that. And at one point he looked at me and said, so what are you thinking? And I said, this reminds me of Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. And he said, what? And I said, this reminds me of Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. And this is the US of A. And things are, like, the infrastructure is crumbling. And I can see that as a foreigner. So I think back to that, and that was 2018 in Trump's America. And back then, I've had a hard time traveling to and through the States because I went to Syria in 2008, and your government's not so much a fan of that. And I got lippy with a customs officer in 2010 when he was asking me, why did you go to Syria? And I said, for vacation. And he said, what do you mean you went for vacation in Syria? And I said, you know what? It's got amazing arts and culture. And I got pulled into the little room at the airport. And since then I got a black mark on my name traveling to your country. So back in 2018, when I crossed the border, they searched my phone. And that was 2018. And that was a wake-up call of how things were changing fairly rapidly. And I think, watching the COVID response in the States has been an ongoing train wreck. And that being said, it's also a bit of a train wreck where I am right now too, but we were late to the train wreck game. I mean, we were trying.
Didn't you guys get a lot of trucker protest?
Oh my gosh, that's still going on.
Oh,
yes, we
still
did.
Going on?
It's still
I feel like we
going
should
on.
apologize for that.
Well, it was, honestly, like when that happened, that was such a moment for me of bubble bursting. Like, we are not immune to any of this. Hi, Forrest. And
Hey.
hi.
Can you guys see me?
Attack and dethrone
Godcast! If I'm sweating, I just want to let you know, if I'm sweating, my AC is out at my crib.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Poor man.
no.
Oh, no.
In Houston in July? That doesn't sound good.
And Houston in July. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
no.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought I thought you actually ran by the pharmacy.
I'm from Dallas, and I don't know how you do it, Houston, with no AC. I would be dead.
Oh, it's not gonna last too long. It happened on a Sunday, and my landlord is gonna get somebody in here tomorrow. But I gotta endure between now and then. So.
Oh, bless you.
That's all good. I'm a tough bird, and I won't give up.
I spent one summer out.
I'm gonna keep going.
West of Houston, near the Brazos, and never again. I will never go back.
Yeah.
No, how
yeah. I mean, I tell people all the time, if you're gonna visit Texas, do not do it during the summer. Just wait until the fall, winter, whatever that. But just do not come here in the summer. It is oppressive.
Hurricane season. That's okay.
Well, Forrest, when you were jumping on, Jessica was talking about coming to the U.S. and a series of experiences. You had been to Syria back in 2008, and that kind of made it difficult for you to travel the U.S. Yeah. But we're just kind of talking about what it's like to live in Canada and to kind of witness the United States experiencing a sort of social collapse of sorts.
Pretty much.
And and I was just remembering when you jumped on, I remembered because your AC is out, it's hot, but it was it was over a year ago. It was last February. There was that cold snap that hit Texas, and the grid went down, and you couldn't join us for I think one of our recording sessions because you were I don't have power. Oh my God. And I'm trying to you were sleeping in your car with your dogs, I think, and
that was it. That was it. No. I gave a blow by blow online because I wanted to know what was going to happen when collapse comes, because it's going to come. I just don't know if it's going to come in my lifetime or if it's going to come after I'm gone from this earth, right? But eventually, the life that we're living now. What'd you say?
He said it's already here.
It's already happening for some.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, okay. I mean, let's face it. My man, Billy boy, how you doing, baby?
It's been a while.
Doing good, brother. Doing good, brother. Good to see you. I gave a blow by blow during that cold snap because I was trying to see what will I do when things really get bad? Am I going to freak out? No, I put my dogs in the car, and we survived, and eventually I got power back. But one day I realized the power is not coming back, And we're just I'm so acclimated to bad shit now. Like when that thing went down July 4th, I wasn't shocked. I expected somebody to get shot on July 4th. I did. I was like, there was going to be some type of mass shooting or something like that. It's the slow unraveling of this, or I guess it's getting quicker now, of this society that is in one way very frightening, but then also from an intellectual side, at least for me, it's kind of interesting to see it go down, how it's going down, taking away our rights, doing women with Roe v. Wade, things of that nature. That's all just desperation. That's where I see it, just desperation now.
I think the hard part, I went about a little over 24 hours without power, and I drive a Ford Fiesta, and I was trying to figure out, can I get my cat, my roommate's dog, because my roommate at the time was stuck at the hospital she works at. Can I get them all out in a Ford Fiesta on these roads? And I didn't think I could, and we didn't have any propane heating, and our fireplace was full of birds' nests. Because when you use a fireplace in Texas, but I had just preparedness, and I survived, and we survived. But people just a block over from me, they died from carbon monoxide, and all these people died from their medical equipment. Sorry, excuse me. And I think just what's so challenging is so many people are going to suffer. It's not even the death part that's. I mean, death is awful. Well, I have a weird relationship with death. I'm very into death positivity, but it's the suffering. There's so many people that are, my students came back, and we all came back from that. And there was just another notch of trauma, Same with Uvalde. We were on our last week of final exams when Uvalde happened. And some of my students skipped their exams because they couldn't handle coming to school. And one school over from where I teach, they had a kid bring a gun to school the day after Uvalde. They caught him before anything happened. But I think the trauma of what the collapse is causing, because I have a lot of friends are like, oh well, when this happens, they're just going to shoot me and it'll be fine. It's like, no, friend, the hard part's not the dying. The hard part's the surviving through the collapse and living still, but through the collapse. And I think that's the part people don't want to grapple with. I say so cheerfully.
I think as a outsider looking in, the thing that strikes me most is how a lot of people's inability to adapt has been compromised, just because, again, from an outsider looking in, it seems like everyone's fighting all the time with everybody else. And it seems like I have quite a few friends in the States, and I've got some family down there as well. And it's rare for people to know their neighbors, it seems, in a lot of cities. It's rare for people to really have a sense of community. And there does seem to be, I'm a Canadian, the gun thing to me is insane. It's absolutely insane, and especially school shootings like that. I can't even contend with that. That is so out of the realm of normal to me, outside of what I hear on the news from the States. And I have to agree with you. Yesterday when I heard there was a shooting on the 4th of July, I'm like, is there a week these days where there isn't?
Yeah.
There were lots of them.
Just that it just goes by and it's just another day. It's not shocking, that gives me pause sometimes. Why am I not reacting to this? I've gotten so numb to it.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, speaking about Canada and guns, I remember a Michael Moore movie, Bowling for Columbine.
Yeah.
Where he looks at, I think it was Detroit and Windsor, because they're so close and they watch the same television and all that. But he said something I thought was interesting. He said that gun ownership in Canada is actually much higher than people think. Maybe not as high as America, but obviously the rates of gun violence are dramatically different. And the connection he was making was, is America's violent culture, obviously at the root of it. Is that true? I know you live in a kind of a rural area. There's probably gun owners just because.
I think that's part of it. I live in the city, but I'm surrounded by rural people for sure. And it's, I spend a lot of time in the rural areas just because of my hobbies and stuff. But I think it's just different. If we want to own a gun, we have to get our firearm safety courses. And I don't actually know really what the process is in the States, but there's no way that somebody under 18 years old is going to go buy a gun in Canada. That's just not happening. There's no access unless it's illegal access. And that definitely still happens for sure. But to own a handgun is actually considered you have to take a separate course to own a handgun because it's considered a restricted item. And I don't even know if you could get, our guns around here are for hunting mostly,
So,
and I mean, you might have somebody who has one for home protection. Like I know my dad did growing up, but it has to be, you have to have a safe in your house. Like people will come and inspect that. And where I am in Alberta, and to some extent in Saskatchewan as well, I actually grew up on the border of Alberta and Saskatchewan. And these provinces are definitely some of the most conservative in Canada. But even gun ownership in Alberta, like it's a contentious issue in Canada too. And actually Trudeau's Liberals are facing a lot of flack about it. Like this also seems to be in Canada, where the Liberal conservative divide, and that's not even mentioning the other political parties, but definitely the Liberal conservative divide is among gun registration and like gun laws and that kind of stuff too. Whereas the conservative people want more ease, I guess, with that. But that's still, it's most of my friends who own guns, it's for hunting, And the other thing too in Canada is that if you owned a gun and you used it for self-defense, that would actually be potentially like a premeditated murder charge because you had the weapon. It's the same thing if I was walking around the city with bear spray and I sprayed somebody with it in self-defense, I could get charged with assault. So it could just be the laws and the culture as well. Like,
wow.
Yeah. I'm not allowed to use anything but my hands and any items I might have on me that could be a tool in self-defense, or I could actually be charged with something premeditated.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when I got my pistol permit in Connecticut, which is actually fairly restrictive in terms of our states, it was a 1-hour class by just some guy. I don't even know what his qualifications were.
Yeah, no. Here it's a weekend and you got to write a test, and
we didn't actually touch any real guns during the class. It was basically about kind of the self-defense laws. Like if you shoot somebody, you expect the cops to come, even if it wasn't self-defense. Like stances of how to hold the gun, but no real like how a gun works, how to like take it apart without accidentally shooting somebody.
Shooting yourself
right.
Really nothing. If you didn't already know how to use the gun you were planning on buying, the class would not have given you any information about it.
Yeah.
You would have just gone and bought it, and then gone to experiment and learn about it.
The whole open carry thing is horrifying to me. I mean, I don't know that American culture is necessarily less or more violent than Canadian culture. We just do it differently up here. I mean, my city's nickname is Stabminton. I always say we just stab each other in bar fight up here. That's what we do. We just punch each other in the face. So everybody's calm. Yeah, but I mean, I definitely, like, the town that I grew up in was really, really rough. Like, I know people who have been shot. I know people who have been beaten into a vegetative state. Like, it's not like that doesn't happen up here. I just don't think it's we're not carrying around guns. It's illegal to walk around with a gun. So it's not I don't know, I guess in a moment of fury, it's not what somebody has on them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I have a good friend who grew up in London, and he was talking about, because, people have this idea that the English are not violent, and it probably becomes obviously television. Look at history, it's like, are you crazy?
Points of contention with that. Excuse me.
Right, but they kind of have this veneer, United States of being this genteel. But he says, they're very restrictive gun laws, be more restrictive than North America. And he says, but the violence, he goes, you cross somebody. He goes, he was almost in a vegetative state. He got the shit kicked out of him once, just for he kind of like was drunk and slighted somebody waiting in line for curry, and the guy, as he's walking away, went around the corner and bashed his head in, and he took him months to recover. And he said it's pretty common. So like the violence just comes out differently.
Totally.
In the UK, and it sounds like it's probably similar to that in Canada.
I would say in Canada, and I noticed this in my late teens, early 20s. I was actually talking to a younger than me person at work the other day, because I'm reaching 40, and suddenly I'm working with 21-year-olds, which is really interesting. But I was talking to this person, and I honestly asked her, I'm like, do people still get into fights outside of bars? Because I don't go to bars anymore. Like, I just don't know. And she's like, no, people aren't really like punching each other on the street anymore. I think the generations coming up behind me are just not as prone to that kind of stuff. Whereas I noticed in my 20s and my 30s, I used to really worry when my partner would go out to a bar, because being a man, I knew that he was actually at higher risk than I was for any kind of violence that might be delivered in this part of the country that I live in. I knew that there was people in my town and definitely in the city who would just be cruising, looking for a fight on Friday nights. That was part of what they did in the small town that I grew up in. And as a woman, I haven't really worried about much violence towards me from stranger men. I've definitely worried about intimate partner violence for sure.
Hear, hear.
I've been subjected to that. That's been the violence that I've been subjected to in my life. And I've worried about violence from other women in the town that I grew up in, but it's not really something that is at the forefront of my mind. Also, I find that in the city I live in anyways, most of the violent crime is actually targeted. Like, it's people who are known to one another. There's not a lot of random violence in my city. And
right.
Actually, just a couple weeks ago, there was 2 elderly men attacked in Chinatown here in Edmonton. And it was a big deal because that does not happen here for the most part. It's very, very rare for that to happen. It's generally people who are known to each other, people who are involved in gangs and stuff like that. I mean, that's still very much happening here. It's just, like you said, it's just different.
Well, I just looked at the statistics because I literally just read this and I wanted to make sure I got it correct. But because of course Texas is tied for top of the road rage incidents in the US. And what's really interesting is, like, before 2019, from like 2016 to 2019, there was only 300 road rage incidents, and then it more than doubled from 2019 to now. And you have to wonder, and 2/3 of these incidents cause injury or death. And it's such a randomized thing but yeah, you have to wonder if that really easy access to the weapon just makes that potentiality so reflexive for people. It's like, that car pissed me off, so I'm going to shoot at them. And it's like we talk a lot about with suicide, right? When you remove the lethal means, people don't tend to commit suicide or complete suicide, we should say.
Fear of getting it wrong. The gun is like pretty assured if you, I mean, that sounds grim, but I think
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Cause if the person has access to the gun, they're more than likely going to complete the suicide. But if you take away that instant access, that they say what it's like within like 15 to 30 minutes, the impulse passes. And if you don't have access to the weapon, it doesn't tend to happen.
Yeah.
I just want to say, cause I think that we're talking about like people going to bars and looking for a fight. It's kind of almost like one-on-one type violence. It's some fucking aggro dude who wants to beat up somebody because he's got some underlying issues he hasn't addressed in his life or whatever, And it's like a cultural thing too. But we're kind of talking about the U.S. right now. We're talking about particularly young men, often white, who are radicalized, and if you want to call it that, they're like this dude that shot up at the parade. He was like on some fucking weird internet subculture, and he was just like an accelerationist of some kind.
Yeah.
Guy goes there, he shoots up like, a crowd of people. Like that kind of violence is like, has a different character to it than, drunk men at a bar.
I think there's something that you just said, though, that's really important about this subculture on the internet. And I think that has to do with access as well. Like when the convoy was going on here, the majority of Canadians that I'm surrounded by, and I think just, over the weeks, the number grew for sure of people who were looking around going, are you freaking kidding me? Like, go home. What are you doing? Like, this is stupid. But I'm just going to say it. I remember,
say it. Don't hold it in.
I'm just going to say it. Sorry if this is less than correct, but it's like, I was talking to a friend of mine who is an immigrant from India here, and he was like, I don't understand how this happened. Like, I don't understand how these people all got together. And I said, look, you take the 4 clowns from my small town, you take the 4 clowns from the town down the street, you give them access to the internet, and suddenly you got a clown parade. Like, this is what happens. They find each other, they get together, and they plan, you know. And
well, you're kind of onto something, though. Robert Evans, the internet, journalist guy for Bellingcat, he literally went through all these Chan logs, and they were talking about what pilled or made someone go to these extremist positions, and it was literally memes, internet, boards, all of that
and
stuff
not belonging
was where,
anywhere. Not actually belonging anywhere, like concrete on the ground. Like, you don't have, like, there's so many people these days that don't have community, they don't have direction in their lives, they don't have elders, they don't have people older than them paying attention to them or anything like that. So it's really easy, I think, for young people, especially people who are feeling disenfranchised, whether or not they are disenfranchised or not. To kind of fall into a black hole of, oh, these are my buddies and this makes sense to me. And then next thing you know, you've got a group of people who are constantly reinforcing your bad idea.
Do you remember when the Columbine shooting happened in the 90s and there was a lot of attention on the parents? They're like, how the fuck did you not know that your kids were like in some Nazi shit and they were like buying guns and ammo? Like, how did you not know? And they're like, I don't know, we didn't know. And everyone kind of just like, okay. And then now mass shootings happen all the time and it's still like, I don't think the question's brought up. And like, how do parents not know that their kids are not right? Like, something is wrong. It's not that they necessarily have to go and do these things. It's just that there's, again, like you said, Jessica, there's no elders there. Like, there's nobody present to be like, hey, like, tell me what you're thinking and how you're feeling, and let's try to like work this out, because I'm just, you seem a little disconnected and dissociated from.
As a high school teacher, what we're seeing, the parents don't know what to ask for. They don't know to look at the TikTok. They don't know to look for these memes. They're completely illiterate on kind of this new subcultural language. Plus the kids, like we run into this problem a lot. They're supposed to give up their phone for state testing, which is bullshit stuff anyway, but they literally will have a decoy phone to give to the adult, and then they'll have their real phone that they'll try to sneak and use during testing. Whoa. I mean, they're so much more, we call them the digital natives. They're the first generation to fully be fluent in digital language. And then you have a group of people who are not digitally fluent, just constantly playing catch up, trying to deal with it. Even I'm pretty digitally fluent as a, geriatric millennial, but even I can't keep up with what they do, and they don't know what to ask for or what to look for. Like they have no clue at all. And then, they're not home and they don't have the other adults asking, they don't have the older kids asking. So there is a huge atomization and fragmentation of community, but the adults just honestly don't know. They're very clueless about, and even the people training them, like, this is what you look for on your kids. It's like, oh dear God, that's 20 years old. Why are you telling them this? So even the trainings are all terrible.
Well, I think you also have a generation of people, maybe two. I don't even know what defines a generation anymore, to be honest.
Oh, God, right.
It seems like it's collapsing. It used to be 15 years, but it seems like
or there used to be like some kind of defining event or something,
right.
But you've got people younger than me now who have also grown up with nothing but this is the end of the world in their ear. So how do you live if you're being told constantly that all you're here to do is die? And you don't have any, and you're told that that's the reality in a death phobic culture as well. I mean, North America is not exactly the most, like, term you used before, death friendly culture. Like, it's something that
definitely not that.
No, like, I think I notice, I work with newborn babies, which is a bit of a trip in a lot of ways, because, every single young one that I come across, I'm sitting there going, my God, what does the future hold for you? And I've got babies having babies. I mean, I work in the NICU and I've seen everybody have kids from 12-year-olds to 45-year-olds. So, I've also noticed as well, like, most of the mothers that I work with these days are now younger than me. Whereas there was a time where they were all older than me earlier in my career, but now they're all younger than me. And like, Nobody has shown them how to take care of a kid. They've never seen anybody breastfeed. They've never held a baby. They've never done any of these things. Like the cultural collapse, like what I would call culture, is so prominent these days that like these kids, they don't know how to live. They don't know how to die. They don't know how to contend with these things. They're all on their personal devices, you know? And so I can see how it would be easy to go down a rabbit hole of, I don't have anything to lose because there's nothing good coming for me anyway.
Right.
And then on top of that too, you get into some of these other, I can never say the word, nihilistic groups. I can never say that word. My first language was French, although I don't speak it now, but it has its effects. But you get into these other groups of people that talk like you, think like you, look like you, you know, and I think it's really easy to get into a very nasty, twisted echo chamber. And one of the things that I did last winter that I'm glad I did, but I'm also sorry for my own mental health that I did, was I started watching US right-wing commentators.
Oh no.
I'm sorry. Ugh.
I had a horrible winter. It was awful.
You're not gonna be able to unsee that.
Well, I started doing it because, you know, my family for the most part are like pretty, we're not conservative by any means. I grew up very strangely. I'm starting to understand now I grew up very differently than a lot of my peers, but one of my family members, who I call my biological associate because we happen to share parents but have very different lives. He went, you know, back in like 2015, he's talking to me about Jordan Peterson and like Ben Shapiro, all these people that I'm like, I don't really know what you're talking about. I'm spending my time at pipeline protests. So like, what, who, what are you talking? Why is this appealing to you? Like, I don't get it. But you know, so I started going down that rabbit hole a little bit just to see what the appeal is. And I can understand rationally, I can't understand, but I can understand how if you felt like you didn't have any direction in life, if your parenting was borderline negligent because your parents are working 4 jobs like mine were just to put food on the table, you know, I can understand how like a strong personality who's almost hawking romanticism values. I'm seeing a big intersection between romanticism and fascism as well, which is actually something that the Nazis that happened with the Nazis as well. And I'm seeing a lot of it too. This kind of
like
you know, this,
like, and all of that kind of very, you know, kind of quasi-pagan worship.
This like focus on individualism, this like love of the folk and all of that too. Like there's a lot of intersections there. So I can see how if you felt like there was no future, or you weren't being taught to adapt to the future, or you felt like you didn't have any community, like I think it's an intersection of a lot of things. I can see how you would maybe be nostalgic about the past and, you know, think that these people who are hawking like traditional Christian values and stuff are definitely the way to go. And it's a really quick way to make life easy, I guess, in your own head, because like, this is the way it is, and this is the way it is, and this is the way it is. But then you do get the subcultures and the flip sides of that, where you get these kids. And I do see it as mostly kids lately, you know, people that I consider kids. I don't see a lot of 40, 50-year-old men going and doing mass shootings. I'm sure that's out there too, but it does seem to be younger than me people who are acting as though they've got nothing to lose.
Well, I mean, if they feel like they have nothing to lose, and you're right, you know, they're not given like any kind of future that to expect or to hope for.
Well, I don't know
they have easy access to guns, so
sometimes I think it's not think they don't have anything to lose. A lot of them don't.
Well, I mean,
right,
that's a good point.
Well, like with terror management. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I wanted you to speak. Sorry.
I don't know if you're familiar with terror management theory, but it's this idea of all the things we do to kind of sublimate or externalize or just otherwise avoid our confrontation of our own mortality. I mean, this is all such classic people trying to manage the terror of mortality. But as those traditional methods, as y'all have been talking about, have failed, then they're going to turn to these kind of non-traditional methods, because if you can't find something in society or something in your beliefs that comforts you in your sense of mortality, then you're going to externalize your fear of mortality into the other, and the violent suppression of the other, the destruction of other cultures, because you have to feel like your culture is going to survive. You have to feel like something is going to be worthwhile. And I think the nihilism that Jess was also talking about plays into it as well. There's a writer named Fisher. He wrote Capitalist Realism. And he was talking about how, depression has a hedonia where we're not feeling any pleasure, but we're seeing a lot of young people having a most nihilistic hedonia, where they're just trying anything to feel pleasure.
Yes.
And I think,
oh my gosh, yes.
related to that is anything to avoid the fear of death, up to and including extreme acts of violence, extreme acts of hatred, anything to avoid that confrontation, especially when we're in a society where we're faced with climate catastrophe, where we're faced with a society that's going to be more deadly to us because of infrastructure crumbling. It's such a psychological projection in a million different ways that it's terrifying. But at the same time, we know people do this, and that's what's so hard, is you can see these things happening with people, but how do we stop it when it's already so far gone? It's such a challenging thing to face. Like, one feels like Cassandra most days, just kind of.
Mm-hmm. The one thing the far right and the far left agree with is that we're heading for darker days. Things are collapsing. They disagree on whose fault it is and how to solve that. But I grew up in the 80s, and it was Reagan's America. And the Republicans would have never, those days they were like, no, America's great. We'll always be great. The future is great because America's great. And I thought it was interesting in the 2016 election, how Hillary, because the Democrats just try to copied the last successful Republican, as John Michael Greer said, where, she's like trying to, kind of that Morning in America, Reagan speech of like, we don't need to be great again, we're already great. And it just fell flat. Like, everybody knew it was flat. And the people that should have landed with, because, they're always trying to go after that elusive white swing voter, right? Like, just didn't believe it anymore. And so Trump was kind of the first president Republican to win on a completely, dark vision of America. And then in 2020, didn't even have a platform. I mean, like, no platform. It was just complete reactionary nihilism. And he got 10 million more votes than he did in 2016. So, this is landing with a lot of people. And, I'm from South Carolina. I've been living in New York for a long time, but I know a lot of Trumpers, and, some of them could almost be left wing, they just, but they just have this reactionary, it's kind of strange that they fall in the political spectrum. I mean, I had one that used to be really into Bernie Sanders. He's a big Bernie burner, and when he didn't win in 2016, he's like, "Well, I'm going to vote for Trump," and I'm like, "How did that happen?" Like, I don't see the connection, but like it was just nihilism. He just like, well, it doesn't matter, if we can't have this, then let's just burn it all down.
Right.
I'm sure you've all noticed that Americans are really good at compartmentalizing their, like, if you ask about a specific issue, they'll tell you what they think. And then, like you said, like, I was going to vote for Bernie, and then like, well, Bernie isn't going to be able to run for president. Okay, well, I'm going to vote for Trump. It's like, it doesn't make actual fucking sense. But if you like sit down and ask them what their beliefs are, it's like every little thing, it isn't consistent because it's based on their own individual, like, preferences and comfort level. It's like it's very individualistic. It's not based on what makes the most sense for how a society should work. It's like there's, I don't know if this applies to other countries and how they view politics and how they vote or how they engage in activism. But like, I feel like America, you will get those cases all the time where people are like, oh yeah, I was a huge Bernie fan, but he's not going to be president or run for president, so I'm going to vote for Trump. And it's like, you realize those two are very different in what they're trying to accomplish, right? Like, so I think that's
Joe Rogan did the same thing.
Yeah,
right?
he's like, he just endorsed DeSantis.
Ron DeSantis, yeah. But he said he was going to vote for Bernie if he had got and two disparate personalities, but yet still he sees nothing Nothing wrong with that. Although Rogan, and I've been saying that for years, people now have come around to it on the left, right? A little bit. They star fuck Joe Rogan so much, right? A lot of the people on the left, they still won't accept, well, he still has some redeeming qualities. He was a piece of shit back in the day. The only thing is that he was in California. He was in California, Los Angeles specifically, so they have a more wide range of people there for him to interview. And he will be interested to somebody and bring him in, even if they don't agree with him politically. But then once he came to Texas, then he could just be himself, right? And all the people that he interviews are either, I don't say local here, because he have people flying in everywhere, but it's become more right wing as far as his show is concerned for two reasons. One is that is his natural inclination, and two, if there's anything that Texas is a bastion for the right wing. So just that his location in and of itself now is going to change. But his politics have always been one that has always been right wing, always. I mean, before
clever and
I remember
his
like, friend Alex Jones. Yeah, that's it. I'm just asking questions. You know?
Just asking questions.
Don't shoot the sheriff.
Not taking a position. Like, just asking questions.
But then it's like the Ron DeSantis thing. It's like, and he praised him before. One time I went down the rabbit hole because see, you're right. I do listen to some right wing stuff just to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on. And it was what's that kid that wears the beanie? The beanie all the
Tim
time.
Pool.
He's Tim Pool, yeah, because he embarrassed because he bald headed underneath there. So he always wear that beanie. It'd be 150 degrees outside all the time, right? But anyhow, it was Tim Pool, fucking Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, and like a little and all they did was star fuck Rogan. It's like they were like trained seals just trying like, here, jump up. It was crazy. I mean, it was like Joe, and he has blown up so big now. This is one thing I despise about him though. He tries to come off like he's just a dumb comedian, but he thinks that he's the smartest dude in the room. It's very subtle, right? Like when he had Sanjay Gupta on there, and they were arguing about the Rona, right? And even Sanjay Gupta, he was deferential to Joe. I'm like, dude, I'm an electrical engineer, right? Now, I have confidence to what I do. Joe Rogan is not going to tell me about engineering, right? The fact that Sanjay Gupta was so star fucking Rogan right there, he let him talk down to him when it came to his own career as a doctor, right? Because I don't know if you saw, I watched it. He was like condescending to Sanjay Gupta, and then he talked shit like later on when another guest was there, and I'm like, dude, have some self-pride and self-respect, if nothing else, man. So the thing with Joe Rogan, he's so big now that it seems like everybody like doesn't want to step on his toes, and it's very
hissing cockroaches and steroids is so much more knowledgeable than doctor. Sure, yeah, eating pig testicles makes you like a doctor. Absolutely, yes, totally.
Well, like
he
Oh, so was that?
What was that?
Don't you all feel like we must have gone through a black hole or a portal today? I mean, that's what's been on the news all day today when they fired up CERN. The scuttlebutt was that we were all going to go and either unleash the demons of hell, or we were all going to go through some kind of black hole because we destroyed some matter.
I would have gotten a memo as a Luciferian if they were unleashed. And
I was going to say,
we have nothing to do with this.
Yeah, I mean, Bill looks like a hologram projection right now, so like, who knows?
Yeah,
that's true.
I could not be real. I could totally be AI. You have no idea.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I know, right?
More horrible.
Well, actually, Patrick and I did get together a couple of years ago. So
yeah, Bill is real. Bill is definitely real.
Okay.
We had lunch, so I drove
Bill
in my car.
Coffee.
Yeah,
for hours. It was a lovely afternoon.
It was.
I don't know how much I'm supposed to talk here, but
talk as much as you want.
I think we're dancing around a lot of issues here, and with all due respect, I empathize completely with the suffering and all those kinds of things. But in the bottom line, those kids aren't wrong. Those kids are right. They understand that their world is fucked. We live in a world that's absolutely collapsing, and they don't have much of a future. So the idea that we think that we're going to talk about left versus right versus people with guns without them, the Supreme Court, we're screwed. Mm-hmm. I was in finance for 30 years. I watched this shit build itself. I feel like the elder statesman here. Born in 1982. I was born in 1962, and I left my job of 30 years, sold everything, moved off grid, and live out in the plains someplace because I can't stand the society anymore.
Yeah,
and it's not because those people are so fucked. It's not even funny. And the empathy that we should be having is beyond anything that most people in this country and Canada can actually understand.
Yeah,
they're fucked and they know it. And there's not any hope that we can give them. It's smoking hopium. Mm-hmm. And so I think the only thing that we can do is to refuse to participate in this quote modern society that's coming up. And like, I'm sorry, the one that I can't see your face, feel my fury, Piper, is that right?
Yes.
I think that we need to have millions more people going off grid and living with permaculture and creating an alternative society, because to think that you're going to change the society from within is absolutely ludicrous. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen. Chris Hedges, he and I share a pretty similar educational background. He said that the system needs to be overthrown, and that you cannot reform this system from the inside. Mm-mm. And the only way that this is going to happen is if we all remember where the pitchforks are. And until we start to get down into that nitty gritty as to how serious this is, all we're doing is putting Band-Aids on a machine gun wound.
Mm-hmm. Well, with all due respect to my elder, it's really interesting to hear someone who was part of kind of the capitalist destruction of society now saying, well, I got mine, now I'm off grid. It's like, well, that's cool, dude, but it's not one and done.
That's not what I'm saying. That there are people that are waking up, but I think it's few and far between. And I'm not trying to say that, no, I didn't have my privilege where a lot of people have. And that's, we could talk about backgrounds all day long, especially about trauma. It's that we need to be able to empower ourselves in a way that we refuse to participate. That we can go and like you said, you want to take yourselves out of Texas, find some land and do a permaculture experiment where it allows community to grow. We don't have any community in this country anymore. We have become so isolated because of these monopolistic controls that nobody seems to be able to stand up for themselves anymore. Nobody's ever being heard. And these poor kids that are even younger than you are now starting to take that out with the only kind of retribution that they think that they can do. And it's just a violent outbreak.
I'm technically middle-aged at this point, but like,
I don't care. I don't care what anybody's age is. No,
I'm just saying that it's not that black and white, because it's a really lovely idea that we can all opt out immediately, but that's not how it works. We have to start building from where we are and building communities where we are. Like, I'm not out yet. I'm still doing a lot in society as I'm going through this process. And even once we are on land, we are not out. We are creating groups and interlocking communities and communities that are building networks. Like, it's not, opting out is a really nice soundbite, but in reality, seeing people who are building the urban farms and kids who are doing mutual aid in downtown, whatever, like, that's what I think is more important than just
preaching to the choir here, because that's what I did and do. I'm completely off grid and I raise almost all of my own food. And I've been trying to create those kind of, I'm not trying to say drop out completely, because the system won't allow that. What I'm saying is that we need to try and create movements like you're talking about, where you refuse to, as much as possible, to participate in the system that's killing us. And
right. Okay. It sounded like you were kind of taking a bit of a.
No, it's because I'm an old fart and that's what people would think. What I'm trying to say is that we have a system right now that is a culture of abuse. Mm-hmm. Everybody in this culture is abused, and it has to do with monopolistic control of our culture. And the sooner that we start standing up and rebelling against that in the way that we can, I mean, shit, growing tomatoes is a rebellious act anymore, that we can start to create a situation where some of these kids might be able to feel safe. Part of trauma, as you probably know, is the inability to feel safe in your body. To be able to stand up and say, hey, I don't feel like all of the things that happened to me are going to continue to happen because now I feel like I've found a safe place. Well, we don't have any of those. If you have a psychological problem, and I've been through counseling up the yang, the only way that you can get somebody to actually sit around and talk to you is if you pay them. You have to go to a therapist, or we don't have the number of people in a country of 330 million people who can say that they have more than one good friend is off the charts how little that is. So we don't have communicate. We don't have a society. We have all kinds of people who are vestedly interested in stepping on each other to try and make a buck. And
I think what I'm encouraged by and what I'm seeing in this next generation, and I think a lot more people will be doing, I mean, it's gonna, I'm definitely fairly doom minded, but to me, what is happening is not that we're going to solve the problems, but I think if we look at it as, you know, kind of a death, right? I feel like the Zoomers are kind of trying to make the best death, a good death of society, a good death of this world as they can, and trying to figure out those passageways. And, you know, I feel like and there are definitely toxic people who are, you know, like terror management theory tells us, you know, lashing out because they can't handle that. But we are seeing more and more young people saying, you know what, it is fucked, but we are going to make this slide into whatever this fuckedness produces the best we can for as many people as we can. And I feel as an older person, that's my job, is to support them, you know, almost like a death doula for society, helping them through that transition.
They're offing people. I live 10 minutes up the road from Columbine. I remember when that happened. And why did the parents not know? Because they didn't care.
Right. And absolutely, you know, part of what I'm also seeing is young people creating families of choice. Like, I think while it's really bad, I still think there are things that are part of this decay that are good. And I'm not going to poo-poo everything about it, because I see, you know, even though it is death and decay and rot, there is also beauty. You know, I don't feel like it's an either or situation. Sorry, I'm rambling. No, I think Forrest, you were saying something, or someone?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I just wanted to say something I say over and over again, which is like, I started the podcast and this podcast because I wanted to meet a bunch of cool people, because I felt the isolation that we're talking about right now. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us have felt that. So in the midst of, it's decaying and collapsing, but in the midst of all of this decay and collapse, there are connections that are being made because we are really seeking it. And so we're finding others. And this is what, I mean, I never thought I would have all of you in a Zoom meeting together, and we're all doing this, and it's like an interesting conversation.
I wasn't trying to diss you at all.
No,
I think what we have a problem with as a culture is that we don't have the balls to just call it out. And what the problem really is. And even if you don't believe in climate change, it's going to make us all extinct, is that if you followed the study of limits to growth, they say that civilization is going to collapse at 2040 because of population growth and diminishing of resources and everything. Most people don't realize that we are absolutely on the verge or in World War III. And what's going to happen in Europe because of resource scarcity and all those kinds of things.
Perfect storm.
These kids, I've been calling the 2020s the Great Convergence. Anything that could possibly go wrong is all going wrong at the same time. And how you recover from that, I hope I live to see how that works out, good or bad, because it's going to be a shit show.
Yeah. When you say the word recover, I kind of smile a little bit, because I'm not sure recover is the right word. Recover, we're going back to and fixing. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. And I'm also like listening to the talk about like getting out and getting off grid. And I've been a similar mindset for some time. I also had one of my elders say to me, though, that doing that, well, two thoughts are converging at once for me, so bear with me. So the first one being that, you know, I've been invited to intentional communities and that kind of stuff, and I've always said no. And I've said no because the reality is that the people who have invited me have been raised in the same culture as I have, where how are we going to, and I've seen it collapse so many times, how are we going to address, you know, conflict differently when all that we've known is punishment? I mean, I think that it's easy to say, you know, we're going to do it differently and like things are going to be different and like, but we have no roadmap for it. And so the same elder said to me, if you're going to go do that, it's actually for the next generation or the generation after that, because they're going to learn from your mistakes. They're going to learn and say, look what worked, look what didn't work. Like, this is a hot mess. This didn't work. And so part of the reason that I haven't gone and done that on my own is because there's no kids under me. So I would just be doing it for myself, which I'm also a bit of a death practitioner in the fact that
I went out and did my own.
Yeah. And, you know,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm a bit of a death practitioner too, I guess, in the sense that I've really had to contend with what have I taken from this place that I live and what do I owe to this place that I live. And as somebody who was raised in the dominant culture, like I'm the first person in my family to go to university. I come from people who were assimilated over the last 2 generations. You know, it's not lost on me that my life has been largely funded by my parents working themselves to death to try to get up a ladder they felt they had to get up in some way. And so with that, I'm very much asking, what do I need to do to see this thing down? And so I don't think there's any fixing it, because fixing it means going back, like fixing it. Like when you fix the toy, you've still got the same toy. You've just got some jumble of it, right? So I'm not sure fixing it is the right word. And I don't exactly live in hope. I love the word hopium. I love that you use that word. That's a word I use a lot too. But I don't live with hopelessness either, because both are tied to an outcome. I live in a sort of hope-free observance. Where can I be of service? And I find for me, my own despair is quelled to some degree by asking how I can be of service, and asking, you know, where can I help? Especially as a woman with no kids, I've got resources, I've got time, I've got some energy left after a 60-hour week at work. But that's been a big question for me, is where can I be of service? And, you know, and that's not a US Canada thing either. Like that's just my own. Because I mean, it's happening up here too. You know, there's no escaping it. And it's to some lesser degree, I think. But again, I think the various intersections of your position in society determine how in it you are at the moment, you know? So if you have a higher income, if you are a certain skin color, if you are of a certain class, if you are of a certain gender, all those things are going to factor into how and when you start to feel the collapse.
Right. I must feel it like I'm those musicians playing as the Titanic sank. It's not as if it's not going to sink, but can I make it somewhat more beautiful and better and more peaceful for people as we go down? And that's, I really love what you had to say, Jess. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think about one of my things, it's actually on my Facebook profile, where I call myself a hospice worker for a dying civilization. And I was I was inspired in part by Stephen Jenkinson's work, but what I was really inspired by was my mother passed away last year, and she was in hospice for about 8 months, and that experience was a very profound experience for me because and they're angels. I mean, hospice workers are amazing. At least the hospice work. You know, with this, you know, we knew she was dying, but they did everything they could to, you know, create as much beauty and joy as they could in what time she had left. And and that really, it was very profound, you know. I mean, we're all going to die. This culture will die. The civilization on this planet will die. But, you know, I know I'm going to die, but I don't stop flossing my teeth. I do try to find what I can. Because it's holding those two opposites in our mind, and it's difficult enough for an adult. And and I know as somebody who was a young person once, particularly my teens, I couldn't do that, and it had to be like, oh, everything was going to be terrible. And I see with my kids, I have an 18-year-old and a 10-year-old, where they just have to be in one, extreme to the other. But kind of holding these two things of like, yes, we're fucked. Yes, it's all going to end. You're going to end. This culture is going to end. Things are unraveling. But, there is still beauty and joy to be found in the world.
But not through Amazon.
No.
Pardon me?
But not through Amazon.
Right. But not through Amazon. And that's something too. It's just like they're used to.
That's kind of what I was after, and I am a cohort that is right on the borderline between boomers and Gen X, because I wasn't in either one of them. They say that boomers ended at 64. I was born in 62. How much do I have in common with a guy that was born in 45? Almost nothing, right? So you start to sit back and be a little bit more objective of what you're actually looking at. And the only thing that's going to give you meaning isn't that there's some kind of progression to the future, like say an 1800s Appalachian farmer who thought that if I can just scratch a little more and we can develop a little bit more and we're going to build this society. The interesting thing about what I do is I'm trying to have a farm like an Appalachian 1800s farmer, but to be able to watch it go the other direction. They were all thought they were building towards something. Now I'm trying to decommission. Decommission the warrior, decommission the society. How do you slow yourself down like the Fed wants to create a soft landing in this economy? Yeah, watch that. But how do you create a soft landing for yourself and your community? And that's the big question. So that you come back out of it having some kind of semblance of community, a certain amount of dignity with your life and the people around you, and you're not being destroyed by left ring, white ring, religious bullshit, guns, and all those kinds of things, that you kind of kick that to the curb and make that anathema, and being able to be able to live in such a way that we de-urbanize in a way that big society or monopolies have tried to urbanize us. There's only 2% of the people in this country that are farmers, and most of them I couldn't call a farmer, because they're all doing John Deere industrial ag stuff. I live in a big field of wheat fields around me, and that's what we have. What we need is what you were talking about is community, urban farming, urban gardening. Urban farmer before I became a farmer out here. It's those kinds of things where you just refuse to participate and give some hope that there's an alternative.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like the difference between cultures and cults. I mean, I keep on saying culture because I don't see one anywhere. I see cults where, you're in a religious cult, you're in a political cult, you're in a, I see cults everywhere, and I'm a little obsessed with cult thinking, but that's just because I truly do see it everywhere. It's like, if you're so sure that this is the truth, and this is the only truth, and these are my only choices, and my worldview has become this big all around, then there's no chance for culture to show up. Culture to me is ongoing ritual, ongoing ceremony, and those things are organic in nature and sprung from place. So especially from place. Especially from place. So, I heard, I think it was Bayo Kamalafe the other day on a podcast. He said something on my friend Chris's podcast, The End of Tourism. I'm recommending it to everyone. It's such a great podcast. And as
I've heard it. It's good.
As a reformed vagabond, I'm so glad he's doing this. I stopped traveling internationally for fun in 2016 because I realized I can't complain about having no community and not feeling like I have a home anywhere if I'm not willing to do home, if I'm not willing to be home and do home. So Bayo the other day, it said something along the lines of home is a ongoing ritual. It's something that you do over and over and over again. And it's a relationship. It's a relationship to where you are. And so that's something that I've been contending a lot over the last few years. Edmonton is I'm first generation out here. All my ancestry, all my people in the ground, all my people alive are way to the east of me, 3 days to the east of me. And the only way that I know of my ancestry and my culture is vicariously in a lot of ways. So here I am, a person on, I call myself an inhabitant of Treaty 6 territory where I live, trying to learn what that means, trying to learn the sounds of the place, trying to learn the true names of the place, trying to learn the rhythms and the ritual of the place. And it really does require a lot of slowing down. But as you've alluded to, that the Amazons of the world, the stuff, the materialism, all of that, to me, it's always been just the filling of a soul hole that people are like, they're desperate for something nourishing. And so often we accept crumbs for a feast.
Yeah, I think we have it robbed from us, actually.
Truly, yeah.
The culture has been destroyed so that we have a culture in the United States anyway that's basically the NFL, or out here the Avalanche and NHL, and Disneyland and McDonald's.
Yeah.
And I talk with my wife about that. When we're out here, I can preserve food, I take care of our animals, we grow vegetables, all those kinds of things. But I'm almost clueless when it comes to what I call putting bows on jars. That if I make let's say canned tomato sauce or something like that, I write it out with a Sharpie, says when I did it, and I put it on a shelf. Other people, especially the feminine of this in culture, can take things and make them look very artistic, very cultural. The old and you put it on a shelf and you go, damn, I'm never opening that.
So pretty. Well, I love that you mentioned Bayo, because in Good Grief Network, one of the things they say all the time is this great quote, "Oh, the times are urgent. Let us slow down."
Yeah.
There you go.
And I think that's what we're also, especially this year, just feels, the to quote T.S. Eliot, the gyre is widening, and it feels like it's just speeding up into chaos. But we don't have to speed up with it. You can kind of just sit in the center of that spinning and just kind of watch it for a little bit and slow down. And I think it will feel it won't be easy, but will feel more achievable to decide what all we are going to do as we slide down the hill into this great whatever we have coming next.
Like I've seen the like compost as a metaphor. Like Donna Haraway writes about that a lot. Another writer I've seen of that, and that's something I'm trying to stay with, is like that kind of like that sitting with it and letting it decompose and letting it go hard, and trying to like eventually the nutrients will get there, but it's hard because I'm just pulled like into so much anger, and it makes me want to like just get out and do something, and I get frustrated because of what is it I'm doing that has any impact, where and I'm really trying to be consciously to slow down and to, like I said, sit with it, let it decompose, let it it'll come out, but it's a practice. It's a practice that I'm not naturally inclined to do. But I am trying to right.
Well, and that to me is grief literacy. That is a grief practice, and that's something that, I mean, everywhere I look around me, I said earlier, we're in a death phobic culture. We're also in a grief illiterate culture. And so I think, tying it all together, like these kids that we see going and doing stupid life altering things. And also you said something about people being in their bodies. Like I see so much escapism these days too, because I think it's really hard to be in a human body during these times. Like it's really hard to stay present with things. And to me, not escaping, like not falling into drugs and alcohol, not falling into even some online dating scenes, like anything can be escapism really. And yeah, I think that what you're describing, Bill, is grief literacy, like really sitting with the fact that, okay, I'm angry, and like, what else am I? And where is that stemming from? And why am I angry? And for me, oftentimes it comes back to grief over feeling helpless, grief over feeling like I'm just one human, grief over feeling infuriated by the dumb shit my neighbor is doing. Like there's a lot of grief there, and we don't know how to do that in this part of the world.
When's the
I think that it's an accept.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go.
I
just had a statement.
I was talking about being grief phobic. When's the last time you saw from any of our empire building conquests that you've ever seen a flag draped coffin come back from the battlefield? They sanitize everything.
Yeah,
I remember that in the Iraq War. There was George Bush had specifically stopped the filming of bodies being come back.
Right.
That's during Vietnam. That was the living room war, where people saw that, and it was very visceral. And you might remember that. I was born in '69, so I was.
Okay.
I don't remember that, but
I don't remember it viscerally. I just remember a guy down the street, when his number came up, he hung himself in his garage, and that whole milieu. But I remember on little black and white TVs watching guys getting spun out of what are the gurneys that they were taking out of the jungle, taking them up into a helicopter, and the thing's spinning around while they're taking him up. And that kind of stuff and then you get to see in the neighborhood I grew up with, a lot of people coming home from that. We don't.
Yeah, the military learned their lesson from Vietnam. They specifically, that's Dorian. If you remember, this became a thing probably before the first Gulf War. Again, I guess that's kind of my generation. But the embedded journalist, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of journalists out there, what you do? Oh, put them in the tank, and we'll become friends with them and drive them around, and oh, you don't want to see that part. You don't want to see that over there. Let's look at. And
tell them what they can say.
They can say, and it was a brilliant propaganda because the losses of that war. Yeah. And obviously in America, it was all very American centric. The losses, I think, were, it was nothing compared to the Iraqis. It was in the million. People are still suffering with
not at all.
uranium and. But just that the experience of not seeing.
Well, and I think they learned from that war how to manipulate the population and everything else as we've gone forward. I mean, there is no way to get real news anymore unless you really dig for it, and people are really reluctant to do that or don't even know how. Unless you've had to go dig through card catalogs or Google things for research papers when you were in college, it's pretty tough to figure out what's actually not bullshit. And unfortunately, most of it is.
What I've noticed with my students, and it really was painful to watch, our last week was right after the Buffalo shooting, and like I said, during Uvalde, and I had a bunch of students talking about how they watched the Buffalo shooting because it was live streamed. They saw the footage afterwards, not during the happening, but they're not sitting with death in a way that's authentic. It's just been turned into a commodity, and I really
video game.
Yeah, I really love what Jess was saying, and I hope for my students, because I think it's going to give them a skill that will help them cope with what we have ahead, is to be in their body, not in a consumer in a body, but in their body and feeling their feelings, rather than just kind of passively, or even kind of as a form of drug or a form of self-harm, consuming these things, but instead just really feeling. And it's hard because the grief we're going to feel is enormous. And I think we'll all have to become comfortable with grief as we go forward. But I think we can. I really think we can grieve together beautifully, at least in some way. And at least that's what I would like to see happening. Perhaps that's optimistic, but that's the hope.
I just want to say, I think the way this conversation turned, what it became, is like kind of the answer. I didn't realize I had a question in my mind and body over the past while, but I was just thinking about all of these horrific things that are happening. I mean, I think about the pandemic a lot. I think about mass death a lot. I think about these mass shootings. I think about what all of this shit means. I'm sure all of you are feeling and thinking similar things in your own way, but and I was just thinking, I don't really have anything to say about this anymore. I mean, I'll do interviews with people and try to give people some insight into what is happening, but like,
I
don't have anything to contribute to, like, what am I going to say? Like, another terrible thing happened, and it just feels repetitive. It feels like we're all kind of, the same problems are reemerging over and over and over again. There's never, it just feels sickening. And so at a certain point, I'm like, I think I'm kind of, I don't have outrage as much. I feel something else is happening. And I think just this conversation about turning to kind of grief, I'm just like, I think the only way that we're all going to navigate through whatever the fuck all this is learning how to grieve appropriately and properly, and with others, because grief includes community.
Yeah.
And because otherwise it's just despair. And that's what I think many of us are feeling here. And I think that's why it doesn't feel like there's any sort of like path forward. There's no like way to get through all this, because it just feels very alienating and isolating.
I think what you just said there about...
Not for me.
Oh, no, you go ahead first.
Not for me anymore. I was gonna say not for me anymore, right? I wish I had everything I've written over the past 10 years, because sometimes I go back and I can see the highs and lows of my life. Now I'm pretty much just on an even plane nowadays, right? Still right, still enjoy stuff, but I realized the futility in the situation. Like, I grew up in Los Angeles, right? The natural land base of that region, I think it can only handle like 500,000 people, right? In fact, what's his name? William Mulholland, right? I watched a documentary on American experience, and it was, I forget the name of the dam that broke, killed like 2,000 people, really bad situation. And what he had planned to do was like keep building bigger and bigger, but they were trying to bring down water from like Alaska, all kinds of crazy shit, because California was growing so big at that time. They said, how in the hell are we going to keep getting waters to these people? Now, I grew up in a city, Linwood, California, and they had a sign when we drove into Linwood, 90,000 people, right? I even thought that back then. I'm like, man, and we were a small town in Los Angeles, right? So now what, they got 9 million people probably in LA County or something like that. It's impossible. Eventually, those people are going to have to leave, right? Same thing with me here in Houston. So I've just come to the objective reality that there's nothing that I can do about it. And it's going to play itself out. It's going to play itself out. How is it going to end? Who knows, right? Who knows? I mean, but it is going to end. That's one thing I do know. Even me sitting here in Houston, Texas, this probably won't be my reality. You know, I mean, if you look just right above me, right, Ogalla Aquifer, that's how we feed all these people here in America, right? By 2050, I believe. Huh?
Yeah. I said the Ogallala's history.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was about to say. 2050, that's when it's saying like it's done. It's totally done. So how in the hell are you going to feed 320 million people when the breadbasket of your society is now done?
Not a chance.
So I mean, I understand. Now, oh yeah, exactly. So I'm just accepting of that now. Now I just tend to care about certain people, and the reason I say I'm not concerned about too many people anymore is because you saw the last election, right? What the hell do I have in common with 70 or 80 million people that either voted for Biden or voted for Trump? I have nothing in common with those people, right? I say all the time now, I'd rather be alone by myself rather than lonely around a bunch of people, right? I'd rather just chill by myself. So when it comes to America and you see all this craziness out here, it doesn't really affect me anymore because I just have no use for it. I have nothing to say. Where I work at, it's all the white dudes there voted for Trump, right? I had a dude, which it should have been taking HR shit. Motherfucker had like, let's go Brandon as a big ass hat. I'm like, dude, you're not really supposed to have that on campus, right? But my point being is that like, what am I gonna have to say in common with him, right? Now there's a young French guy that I work with, and he's like, JB's 20 years younger than me. And we have lunch like once a month, right? And we never run out of stuff to talk about, right? And we were at lunch on Sunday, like for 3 hours. And we talked about different topics, history, things of that nature, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, that is crazy that a young white French dude and I'm 20 years younger, is like one of my best friends, and we never run out of stuff to talk about. But he's an intellect like you guys, right? I mean, that really shows you how fucked up it is, right? I can have a more engaging conversation listening to you guys and talking with you than even my next door neighbors, right? If I was going to try and solve the situation, how many people do I know here in Texas that actually understand that there's a problem? I say all the time as an engineer, one thing, if we try and solve a problem, we're going to have to do it together. We have to identify that something is a problem first. But if you don't think there's a problem or you think things are going well, then what the hell we got to talk about? We got to at least identify that there's a problem that needs to get done. But if you can't do that, man, why even have the conversation, right? Most people do not even think about, they want it to work out. I think you are, certain people, they do see like those kids, they see something is wrong, yes. But ultimately, they want to try and make this shit work, right? It's not working for them, but most people are not talking about building a different society. They're just trying to say like, well, if I fuck around at the edges and vote for this person or Bernie or something like that, but there's no root cause analysis as to what's going down right now. I don't see any of it.
In economics, they call it the fallacy of sunken costs. Mm-hmm. The system must be working properly. So even though it looks like it's starting to fail, the best way to fix it is just to throw more resources at it rather than change it. And we are sitting in a fallacy of sunken costs, that it doesn't seem that anybody's willing to change. And it's pretty obvious that we are willing to sacrifice humanity for the economy. And until we
fix so bonkers. COVID, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Well, my feeling is to say we should wrap up personally. Unless anyone here has any final words. Colin, you didn't say a lot. You come off as a listener more than a talker. Well, but I want to give you an opportunity to speak right now if you have anything you want to say.
I'm kind of out of it. Like I drove home late last night, and then we had neighbors firing off mortars until like 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, that was me too. Yeah.
How are the gardens?
They're doing good. Like we had it's been a really rainy spring and early summer, so everything's kind of not doing great because it was really cool, cool for a long time. But it's finally starting.
Cold got here too.
We've got squash and peas, and beans are getting tall enough. They're going to be starting soon. So
we're doing good because I have drip irrigation, but it's been in the mid 90s and we haven't seen rain in a couple of months.
See, and I feel like I'm living in the Pacific Northwest on the prairies right now. All that we've seen is rain, whereas last summer my plants died to a heat dome last summer, and now my plants are dying to like flood.
Rain. That sounds really cool.
We had so much rain that our cherry tree, the cherries normally just get stolen and eaten by the squirrels before you can touch one. But this year they started molding on the tree.
Oh my god.
Jeez.
Yeah. Wow. I mean it was crazy. So yeah, I planted my tomatoes and everything the time I normally do. And then it just poured rain and was like 55 degrees for like 2 weeks. And I was like, well, they're pretty fucked, but they're hanging in there. They're hanging in there, but they're just not happy about it.
Yeah. My cucumbers still have 2 little leaves. I'm not getting cucumbers this year.
That's so sad.
It is sad. I know. My brassicas, though, my cabbages and stuff, they're very happy. But like the majority of stuff is sitting there going, what the hell do you want me to do? And I'm like, I can't help you this year. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's one thing. My artichokes this year have loved it because it stayed so cool for so long. They're going crazy. But
yeah.
We're on pig watch. We have a sow that's due any day now.
Oh, nice.
We had one at the end of May. We had a freak snowstorm just before Memorial Day, and of course that decided that she had to have her babies then.
Oh gosh.
So we had 7 of them born in 4 inches of snow, and we managed to save 2 of them. And, we've been bottle feeding them 4 times a day for the last 5 weeks.
Oh man.
just about over with. So they're cute as the devil.
Yeah.
I bet they are.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me, Patrick and Bill and everybody.
Jessica, it was really good to meet you.
Yeah,
thanks,
thank you. It was good to meet all of you.
Yeah, this was a really interesting conversation. I and your presence was definitely a big part of that. So yeah, thanks. You know, we do this once a month. You know, you're always invited back on. Same to you, John. I know you were. I missed you last time you were on here.
Yeah, and I'm pissed at Sleewa for not showing up.
Right. Yeah. Mike kind of bailed on us. Sleeves.
Last time it was Forrest, so nice to see you, dude.
Yeah, right.
It's really nice to finally kind of meet you, Forrest. Oh my God, I've been such a big Facebook fan.
Oh yeah, right back at you. But I'll tell you something.
I didn't mean to dance on my soapbox. Sometimes I just get after it. So.
Oh no. Yeah. I always speak in mind. One thing I'll say about Mike though, I'm happy to see him happy with the pickleball thing. And I go on YouTube all the time. I look at his videos.
We almost went a whole podcast without mentioning pickleball, man.
Man, come on, man. I had to give props to my man, right? But he looks, seriously, he looks so happy. And it makes me happy to see him so happy, you know, because his journey about all this has mirrored mine, because we've known each other for so long now. You know, I think about it, probably over 10 years now. And it's sad we never met, and I feel bad about that. In fact, that's what I want to start doing for myself. I want to start pulling up on all you guys and seeing you and things of that nature, right? Because I'm 49 years old, right? I feel good. You know, I give you a 10-minute mile right now, right? So I'm not in bad shape, but you get 49. You get 49, and I'm not gonna say you start getting morbid about the end, but you really start grasping. I'm gonna be 50 on October 18th. And you like, man, I'm in the 5s now, baby. Right?
Head up to I-70, head west. Come on.
Then head north. Come north a little bit too.
I want to do all that, seriously, because now I'm at the point where I can't. And that's my job. I'm taught to fix it. And now I'm at peace with the fact that I can't fix it. There's nothing that I can do, right? I'm not going to go to Los Angeles and leave the Exodus out here.
About your Piper, I'd love to hear about your attempts to find land and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
you're talking.
Yeah, definitely keep us in the know with that, and we'd love to get back on again.
I live on 40 acres out in the middle of nowhere at a sea of grass, and I took a farm or a piece of land and built a farm from nothing.
I'm admiring what y'all doing, especially since there's baby pigs, because it's like baby pigs.
We've got pigs. We raise chickens for eggs, chickens for meat, turkeys, and we've got Nigerian dwarf goats that we raise for milk, for cheese and yogurt. And then I've got about an acre garden where we grow pretty much all the rest of our food.
Nice.
Oh, that's badass. Thank y'all so much. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming on.
Pickleball tournament at the end of the world.
Yeah. I seriously, whatever that cognitive bias is, where you like never hear about something, but then you hear about it and see it everywhere. Like Mike triggered that. Mike triggered that for me with pickleball. Like I had never heard of it until like 2 months ago, and now like.
In all honesty, that's getting big, man. I'm starting to hear that like all over the place. Like a lot of people just getting into the pickleball thing. I mean, seriously, like online, it seems like it's just like the new rage, to be quite honest with you. So,
all right. Well, it's not just me then.
Well, it was beautiful seeing everyone. This was a lovely conversation. Let's absolutely do this again, and y'all have a good night.
Thank you all, guys. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.